I was standing in front of my hallway mirror putting on my coat to go to Sunday dinner at my daughter's house. It was the highlight of my week. Then my phone buzzed on the mahogany table. It was a text from my lawyer. It read simply, "Call me now. Do not go there." What he showed me about her plan changed the course of everything. If you have ever been betrayed by the people you love the most, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It helps me to know I am not alone in this. My name is Harrison Clark. I am 72 years old. I live in a 5,000 square foot house in the suburbs of Chicago that is far too big for one man. The silence in this place is heavy. It presses against your eardrums. It has been 8 months since my wife Martha passed away, and the house still smells faintly of her lavender potpourri, but her laughter is gone. That Sunday started like any other. The Chicago winter was settling in, painting the world outside my window in shades of gray and white. I was standing in my dressing room adjusting the silk tie Martha had given me for our 40th anniversary. My hands were steady. My mind was sharp. I want you to remember that detail because it becomes very important later. I am a retired general contractor. I spent 40 years building skyscrapers and commercial centers. You do not survive in the construction business in this city by being soft or by being forgetful. I looked at my reflection. I saw an old man, yes. My hair is white. My face has deep lines carved by decades of working in the wind and sun. But I did not see a weak man. I saw a father who was trying his best to hold on to what was left of his family. Sunday dinner at my daughter Emily's house in Oak Park was my anchor. It was the only thing that got me through the lonely week. I imagined seeing my daughter's smile. I imagined shaking hands with my son-in-law Brad. I imagined the warmth of a full table. I thought they needed me as much as I needed them. I thought we were grieving together. I reached for my car keys on the side table. My hand was hovering right over them when my phone vibrated against the wood. It was a harsh, jarring sound in the quiet room. I glanced down. A text message. That was strange. Mr. Roth, my attorney for 30 years, does not text. He is old school. He believes in typed letters and landlines. If Roth sends a text on a Sunday afternoon, someone has died. I picked up the phone. The message was in all capital letters. Harrison, stop. Do not go to Oak Park. Call me now. My heart skipped a beat. A cold feeling colder than the snow outside started to spread in my chest. Had there been an accident? Was Emily hurt? Was the house on fire? I pressed the call button immediately. Roth picked up on the first ring. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. "Harrison, are you in your car?" he barked. His voice was shaking. I had never heard Roth shake in 3 decades. "No," I said. "I am in the hallway. I am leaving in 5 minutes." "What is wrong? Is Emily okay?" "Listen to me very carefully," Roth said, and his voice dropped to a whisper that was more terrifying than a scream. "You cannot go to that house. You cannot step foot on their property. If you go there tonight, you might not come back out." I laughed. It was a nervous, confused sound. "Roth, what are you talking about?" "It is a pot roast dinner. It is my daughter. It is a trap." Harrison Roth cut me off. "I have a friend at the courthouse clerk's office. She called me 10 minutes ago. She saw a filing come through late Friday afternoon right before closing. It was sealed, but she recognized the names." I gripped the phone tighter. My knuckles turned white. "What filing?" "Emily and Brad filed an ex parte petition for emergency conservatorship over you, Harrison." The words hung in the air. I knew what those words meant. I had seen it happen to guys in the construction union. It meant legal guardianship. It meant losing your rights. They attached a medical affidavit. Roth continued speaking fast, trying to get the information out before I did something stupid. "They are claiming you have advanced dementia. They claim you are a danger to yourself. They claim you have been wandering the streets at night and leaving the gas stove on. That is a lie, I said. My voice was low and dangerous. I have an electric stove. I have not used gas since 1998. It does not matter what the truth is right now, Roth said. It matters what they filed. They have requested an emergency order to place you in a secure facility for evaluation. Harrison, if you walk into that house tonight, they likely have a doctor or even the police waiting to execute that order. They want to declare you incompetent and take control of your accounts by tomorrow morning. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at the family photo on the hallway console table. It was taken just 6 months ago at a barbecue. Emily was hugging me. Brad was grilling burgers, laughing. They looked so normal. They looked like family. Why, I whispered. The words scraped my throat. Because of the liquidity, Harrison Roth said. I did some digging after I got the call from the clerk. Brad is in trouble. Deep trouble. He owes money to people you do not want to owe money to. They need access to your $18 million, and they need it now. They are going to lock you away in a budget nursing home and drain your life's work dry. I stood there in my empty house. The silence was no longer heavy. It was screaming. My daughter. The girl I taught to ride a bike. The woman I walked down the aisle. She was not waiting with a pot roast. She was waiting with a cage, Harrison Roth said. Are you still there? Do not go to Oak Park. Stay in your house or lock the doors. No, I said. What, Harrison, listened to me? No, I repeated. My voice was steady now. The trembling in my hands had stopped. I looked in the mirror again. The sad, lonely old man who just wanted a hug from his daughter was gone. In his place stood the man who had poured concrete for the city's toughest foundations, the man who had negotiated with unions and sharks and came out on top. They think I am a senile old man, I asked the empty room. They think I am a helpless victim. I am not staying home, Roth, I said into the phone. Harrison, do not do anything rash, Roth warned. I am coming to your office, I said. I want to see the filing. I want to see the lies they wrote about me with their own hands. And then I am going to go to dinner. You cannot go there, Roth shouted. I have to, I said. I need to look them in the eye. But I am not going alone. And I am not going unprepared. Roth, get the private investigator on the line. I want to be wired. I hung up the phone before he could argue. I looked at the photo of Emily one last time. I took it out of the frame. I looked at her smiling face and I felt something inside me break. It was the last piece of my heart that still believed in unconditional love. I tore the photo in half. I put on my heavy wool coat. I checked my pockets, wallet, keys, and a small digital voice recorder I used to use for site inspections. I walked out the front door into the biting Chicago wind. It was cold, but I did not feel it. I felt nothing but a cold, hard fire burning in my gut. They wanted to take everything from me. They wanted to erase me. They were about to find out that Harrison Clark does not break. He breaks back. I started the engine of my car. I did not turn toward my daughter's house. Not yet. First, I had to arm myself. The war had started and my enemies were my own flesh and blood. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the tracks of my tires in the fresh snow, driving straight toward the truth that would destroy my family forever. I drove through the blinding snow of a Chicago blizzard, but the cold I felt inside the cabin of my truck had nothing to do with the weather. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth in a hypnotic rhythm that seemed to echo the questions hammering in my mind. How did I miss it? How did I not see what was happening right in front of my eyes? As I navigated the slick streets toward downtown, memories from the last few months began to replay in my head, but this time the context was different. I remembered a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. I was sitting in my living room reading the newspaper. Emily had come over to bring me some soup. She walked in and immediately asked Dad, "Where are your glasses?" I touched my shirt pocket. They were right there. I told her I had them. She looked at me with this pitying expression, a look that made me feel small, and said, "No, Dad, you left them in the refrigerator again." I found them behind the milk. I had not left them in the refrigerator. I knew I had not. But in that moment, seeing her concern, hearing her soft voice, I doubted myself. I thought maybe grief was making me absent-minded. I thanked her. I apologized. Now gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, I realized the truth. She had planted them there. It was not an accident. It was a staged event. Then there was the medication. Every morning for 20 years, I have taken a single pill for my blood pressure. I never miss a dose. It is as routine as brushing my teeth. But last month, Brad asked to see my pill organizer. He frowned and said, "Harrison, you missed 3 days in a row." Look, the slots were full. I stared at the plastic box, confused. I could have sworn I took them. Brad sighed, patting my shoulder, and said, "We need to be careful, Harrison. This is how strokes happen." I felt a surge of nausea rising in my throat as I drove past the city lights. They were not worried about my health. They were building a case. They were manufacturing a narrative of a senile, incompetent old man who could not take care of himself. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. They were making me question my own sanity so that when they made their move, I would not have the strength to fight back. I pulled into the parking lot of Roth's office building. The structure was dark, a towering slab of concrete and glass against the night sky, except for one illuminated window on the 4th floor. Roth was waiting. When I walked into his office, he did not offer me a seat or a drink. He was standing behind his mahogany desk, his face red with suppressed rage. In front of him lay a thick stack of legal documents. He looked at me, his eyes sharp and clear, and said, "You need to see this, Harrison. You need to read exactly what your daughter thinks of you." He shoved the file across the desk. The title page read, "Petition for Emergency Conservatorship." My hands shook as I turned the page. It was an affidavit signed by Emily. I began to read, and with every sentence the image of my loving daughter shattered a little more. Item 1. On the night of November 12th, the subject was found wandering the perimeter of his property at 2 in the morning, confused, disoriented, and inadequately dressed for the weather. Subject appeared to be searching for non-existent intruders. I slammed the paper down on the desk. That was the night the north pipe burst. I heard the hissing sound from my bedroom. I went out with a flashlight and a wrench to shut off the main valve before the basement flooded. I was not wandering. I was saving the foundation of the house. I was being a general contractor. Emily knew that. I told her about the repair the next day. She had twisted a moment of competence into a symptom of dementia. I forced myself to keep reading. Item 2. Subject frequently engages in prolonged conversations with people who are not present in the room. Subject exhibits signs of hallucinations and psychosis, speaking to his deceased wife as if she were alive. The air left my lungs. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Yes, I talk to Martha. Every night before I turn off the lamp, I look at her photo on the nightstand, and I tell her about my day. I tell her I miss her. I tell her I love her. It is my way of coping with the crushing loneliness of that big, empty house. Emily had overheard me once when she stayed over. She had stood in the doorway listening. I thought she understood. I thought she was grieving too. Instead, she was taking notes. She was turning my grief into a diagnosis. Roth walked around the desk and leaned against the edge, crossing his arms. "It gets worse, Harrison. Look at the financial addendum." I flipped to the back of the file. There was a request for immediate control of all assets, citing imminent risk of dissipation. "They claim you are giving away money to internet scams," Roth said, his voice hard. "They claim you are unable to understand the value of $1. But that is not the real story. He pulled out another sheet of paper, a printout from a private investigator. This is why they are doing this, Harrison. It is not about your health. It is about Friday. Friday, I asked, confused. Next Friday, Roth clarified. Brad has a balloon payment due on a hard money loan he took out for a commercial real estate deal that never existed. He owes $1.2 million, and the people he owes it to do not file lawsuits. They break legs. I stared at the numbers. Brad was not just a failure of a real estate agent. He was a gambler. He was leveraging money he did not have. If they get this conservatorship tonight. Roth continued explaining the mechanics of their trap. They will have legal authority over your estate by tomorrow morning. They have already contacted a broker. They plan to list your house for a quick cash sale. They want to liquidate your portfolio. They are going to take your $18 million, pay off Brad's debts, and dump you in a facility called Sunny Meadows. Sunny Meadows. The name sounded pleasant, but Roth's expression told me otherwise. I looked it up, Roth said. It is a state-subsidized facility on the south side. They have been cited 12 times in the last year for neglect, bedbugs, and malnutrition. It costs $4,000 a month. That is where they want to put you, Harrison. They want to strip you of your dignity, steal your life's work, and lock you away in a warehouse for the dying so they can live in luxury. I closed the folder. The sound was loud in the quiet office. I looked at my hands. These hands had built skyscrapers. These hands had held my wife as she took her last breath. These hands had changed Emily's diapers. For a moment I felt a wave of pure sorrow so deep, I thought I might drown in it. I wanted to curl up on the floor and weep for the little girl who used to hold my finger when we crossed the street. But then the sorrow hardened. It cooled into something solid and unbreakable like steel tempering in oil. They think I am gone, I said softly. They think Harrison Clark is already dead, just a ghost walking around a big house. Roth nodded. They are counting on you being passive. They are counting on you being the nice, confused old man they painted in these papers. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. I checked the recorder in my pocket to make sure it was still secure. They made a mistake, Roth, I said. They forgot who raised them. They forgot that I can read a blueprint better than anyone. And I see exactly what they are building. I am going to dinner, I told him. Roth looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. Harrison, if you walk in there, you have to be perfect. You have to give the performance of your life. If you slip up, if you show your anger too soon, they will use it against you. They will call the police and say you are violent. I know, I said. I will be the man they described in these papers. I will be the confused, frail old man. I will give them exactly what they want right until the moment I take everything away. I walked out of the office and back into the snow. The wind bit at my face, but I welcomed it. It made me feel alive. It made me feel ready. I got into my truck and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound. I pulled out onto the street and turned toward Oak Park. I was driving into a trap, but for the first time in months, I did not feel lost. I knew exactly where I was going. I was going to war. Roth followed me out to the parking lot, his coat flapping in the icy wind. He grabbed my arm just as I reached for the door handle of my truck. His grip was tight, desperate. Harrison, please listen to reason. You do not have to do this. We can go to a judge in the morning. We can get a temporary restraining order, go to a hotel, go to the airport, go anywhere but that house. I looked at his hand on my sleeve, then up at his worried face. Roth was a good man. He was a man of statutes and filings and safe, calculated risks. He fought his battles with paper. I fought mine with concrete and steel. I appreciated his concern truly. But he did not understand. He did not understand that running away would only validate their narrative. If I disappeared tonight, if I hid in a hotel room like a frightened animal, it would only prove that I was unstable. It would give them more ammunition. They would tell the judge I had wandered off, that I was missing, that I was a danger to myself. I gently removed his hand from my arm. "Roth," I said, my voice cutting through the wind. "Do you remember the cement strike of '86? He blinked, confused by the non sequitur. "I think so." "Why?" "I had $3 million of wet concrete pouring into the foundation of the West Loop Center," I told him. "The union boss showed up with 20 guys carrying baseball bats. They told me to shut down the pour, or they would break every windshield in the fleet. They thought they could intimidate me. They thought I would cut a check just to make them go away." Roth stared at me, shivering slightly in the cold. "I did not cut a check," I continued. "I picked up a shovel. I stood in front of my trucks, and I told them that the first man who stepped onto my site was going into the foundation along with the rebar. I did not blink. And you know what happened? They walked away." Roth whispered. He knew the story. Everyone in Chicago construction knew the story. "They walked away," I confirmed, "because bullies only understand one thing: strength. If you give an inch, they take a mile. My daughter and her husband are bullies, Roth. They are trying to bully me out of my life. If I run now, they win. I have to face them. I have to look them in the eye when they try to plunge the knife in. I need to see it." "Why?" Harrison Roth asked, his voice full of pain. "Why do you need to hurt yourself like this?" "Because I need to be sure," I said. "I need to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is nothing left to save. If I am going to destroy my own family, if I am going to cut my daughter out of my life forever, I cannot do it based on a piece of paper in a file folder. I need to see her face. I need to hear her lie to me. I need to feel the betrayal in the room. Then and only then can I do what needs to be done without regret." Roth sighed, a long cloud of white breath escaping into the night air. He knew he could not stop me. He nodded once, resigning himself to my stubbornness. "Fine," he said. "But you do not go in there naked. You go in there armed. Not with a gun, Harrison. With evidence." I reached into the glove compartment of my truck. It was a mess of old receipts, tire gauges, and napkins, but I found what I was looking for: a roll of black electrical tape. I always kept one. You never know when you need to fix a loose wire. Then I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the digital recorder I had taken from my home office. It was a high-end model I used to dictate inspection notes on job sites. It could pick up a whisper from across a noisy room. It had a 12-hour battery life. I pressed the record button. The tiny red light flickered to life. I tested it. Testing. 1, 2, 3. I played it back. My voice came through crisp and clear, cutting through the background noise of the wind. "It works," I said. I unbuttoned my coat and opened my suit jacket. I placed the recorder inside the inner breast pocket of my vest, positioning the microphone so it poked just slightly out of the top. Then I used the electrical tape to secure it firmly to the fabric lining. I moved around, twisting my torso, checking for any bulges or clicks. It was invisible. Roth watched me with grim approval. "Keep your jacket buttoned," he advised, "and try not to hug them too tight." "I will not be hugging anyone tonight," I said. I pulled out my smartphone. My fingers, thick and calloused, danced over the screen. I opened the location sharing app. I selected Roth's contact. "Share indefinitely." I held the screen up for him to see. "You see this blue dot? That is me." "I see it," Roth said, checking his own phone. "If that dot stops at their address and does not move for 3 hours, or if it moves toward the south side where that nursing home is located, you call the police," I instructed him. "You tell them I am being held against my will. You bring that file. And you bring the cavalry. I will be watching it every second," Roth promised. "Harrison, please. Be careful. They are desperate. Desperate people are dangerous." "I know," I said. I climbed into the truck. The seat was cold, the leather stiff. I slammed the door shut, sealing myself inside the cabin. It felt like a tank. It felt like a fortress. I rolled down the window one last time. "Roth," I said. "Yeah. If I don't make it back," I said, my voice steady. "Make sure the hospital gets the money. Make sure they don't get a dime." "I will draft the trust documents tonight," Roth said. "They will be ready for your signature at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Just survive tonight." I nodded and rolled up the window. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the lot. The snow was falling harder now. Thick flakes that swirled in the headlight beams like white moths. The city was blurring the edges of the buildings, softened by the storm. I drove toward the highway ramp that would take me to Oak Park. My hands were relaxed on the wheel. My heart rate was slow and steady. I was not panicking. I was focusing. I was entering a state of mind I had not visited in years. It was the mindset of a man walking into a negotiation he knows he cannot lose because he is willing to burn the table down. I thought about the role I had to play. The confused old man, the forgetful father, the burden. It would be the greatest performance of my life. I had to suppress the sharp, calculating contractor who could spot a structural flaw from 50 feet away. I had to become the flaw. I rehearsed my lines in the quiet of the truck. Where am I? I forgot my glasses. Did I take my pills? The words tasted like ash in my mouth. They were the words of the man Emily wanted me to be. The man she had invented in her affidavit. I would give her that man. I would serve him up on a silver platter. I would let her think she had won. I would let her and Brad think they had outsmarted the old builder. I merged onto the expressway. The traffic was light due to the weather. I watched the miles tick down on the dashboard. 10 miles to Oak Park. 10 miles to the end of my life as a father. 10 miles to the beginning of my war. I thought about Brad. I thought about his handshake, always a little too damp, a little too eager. I thought about the way he looked at my house, calculating the square footage, estimating the resale value. I had always known he was weak. I had always known he was a hustler looking for a shortcut. But I never thought he was evil. I never thought he was capable of locking a human being in a cage to pay off his gambling debts. And Emily, my little girl. I remembered teaching her to skate on the frozen pond in the park. I remembered her crying when she scraped her knee. I remembered how she used to look at me like I was Superman, like I could fix anything. When did I stop being Superman to her? When did I become just a bank account with a pulse? The exit for Oak Park appeared through the snow. I signaled and turned off the highway. The streets here were lined with old trees, their branches heavy with white powder. The houses were grand and well-maintained with warm yellow lights glowing in the windows. It looked like a picture postcard of the American dream. But I knew what was hiding behind those curtains. I knew that inside at least one of those beautiful homes, a conspiracy was waiting. I turned onto their street. I saw their house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was a large colonial I had helped them renovate 5 years ago. I had paid for the new roof. I had supervised the kitchen remodel. I had poured the patio in the backyard myself, working on a Saturday, so they could save money on labor. Every brick in that house held a memory of my generosity, and tonight they were going to try to steal the rest of me. I pulled up to the curb a few houses down just to take a moment. I checked the recorder one last time. I tapped it through my coat. It was there. Silent. Waiting. I looked at the rearview mirror. My eyes were hard. There was no fear in them anymore. Only a cold, terrifying clarity. "Showtime, Harrison," I whispered to myself. I put the truck in park, but I left the engine running for a moment longer, listening to the hum, grounding myself. Then I killed the ignition. The silence rushed in. I opened the door and stepped out into the snow. The wind hit me, but I didn't flinch. I buttoned my coat to the top, hiding the recorder, hiding my heart, hiding the man I really was. I hunched my shoulders slightly. I added a slight shuffle to my step. I walked up the driveway toward the house where my daughter was waiting to betray me. I was walking into a trap, but I was the one bringing the dynamite. I stood on the front porch of the house I had paid to renovate, letting the snow accumulate on my shoulders for a full minute before I rang the bell. I was 45 minutes late. I had parked down the street and watched the digital clock on my dashboard tick away the time minute by agonizing minute. I knew exactly what that delay would do to them. It would make them anxious. It would make them angry. But most importantly, it would fit perfectly into the story they were telling the court. Harrison Clark gets lost. Harrison Clark loses track of time. Harrison Clark wanders in the snow. I reached out and pressed the doorbell. I heard the chime echo inside a deep, expensive sound that resonated through the heavy oak door. Almost immediately, I heard the sound of running footsteps on the hardwood floors inside. The lock tumbled and the door was thrown open with violent force. Emily stood there. For a second, just a split second, I saw the flash of annoyance on her face, the tight set of her jaw that said, "Where the hell have you been?" But then, as if a director had yelled action, her face transformed. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened in a perfect O of terrified concern. She lunged at me, grabbing the lapels of my coat, pulling me across the threshold. "Dad! Oh my God! Dad!" she cried out, her voice pitching up into a hysterical register. "Where have you been? We were sick with worry." I stood there, letting her shake me slightly. I let my shoulders slump. I let my eyes dart around the foyer as if I did not recognize where I was. I am sorry. Emily, I stammered, making my voice sound thin and reedy. The snow. The streets all look the same in the snow. I think I missed the turn. I drove around the block 3 times. You missed the turn, she repeated loudly, clearly performing for an audience I could not yet see. Dad, you have driven to this house 1,000 times. How could you get lost? You are freezing. Look at you. You are shaking. I was not shaking from the cold. I was shaking from the effort of not pushing her away. Her perfume, a heavy floral scent that cost $300 a bottle, filled my nose. It was suffocating. Behind her, Brad emerged from the living room. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that I knew cost more than my first car. In his right hand, he held a crystal tumbler half full of amber liquid. Scotch. Expensive scotch. Probably my scotch from the bottle I had given him for Christmas. He did not look worried. He looked agitated. He looked like a man whose timeline had been disrupted. He walked past Emily, not even looking at me at first, and went straight to the open door. He leaned out into the snowy night, his head swiveling left and right, scanning the street, scanning the driveway. Did you drive yourself? Harrison? He asked, his voice sharp. Yes, I said, staring at my boots. Did anyone follow you? Did you see any other cars? No, I whispered. Just me. Just the snow. Brad grunted. He stepped back inside and grabbed the heavy door. He slammed it shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. Then he turned the deadbolt. Click. He engaged the secondary security latch. Clack. And then he did something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He took a key from his pocket and locked the handle itself from the inside, then slid the key back into his pocket. I was locked in. It was a subtle action, one he probably thought I was too addled to notice, but to me it sounded like the cell door slamming shut. They were not keeping the cold out. They were keeping me in. Okay. You are here now. That is what matters, Emily said, helping me out of my coat. She patted my arms, checking my pockets under the guise of affection. I held my breath as her hand brushed over the left side of my chest, right where the recorder was taped. She paused for a fraction of a second, feeling the bulk of the device through the layers of wool and tweed. "What is this?" she asked, frowning. My heart monitor." I lied, the excuse coming to me in a flash of desperate inspiration. "The doctor, he gave it to me yesterday. For the palpitations." Emily's face smoothed out. A heart monitor. Perfect. Another symptom. Another piece of evidence for her file. "Oh, Dad," she sighed, giving Brad a meaningful look. "You did not tell us about that. See? This is why you need help." She took my coat and hung it in the closet. I stood in the center of the foyer, looking around the home my money had built. It was magnificent, I had to admit. The ceiling soared 20 feet high, adorned with a crystal chandelier that scattered light across the marble floors. I remembered the day Emily had called me sobbing, saying the contractor had quoted them $12,000 for the flooring, and they only had $4,000. I had written the check the next morning. For the grandbabies, I had told myself. So they have a nice place to crawl. There were no grandbabies, just expensive Persian rugs and silent, cold perfection. To my left in the formal living room, I saw the grand piano, Steinway. I had paid for that too, a gift for Emily's 35th birthday, because she said she wanted to take lessons again. It sat there, the lid closed, covered in a layer of dust that was visible even from here. It was a prop. Everything in this house was a prop designed to signal success to the world, funded by the loans they never mentioned again once the checks cleared. Brad walked up to me, swirling his drink. He loomed over me. He was a tall man, soft in the middle but heavy. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be guiding, but it felt heavy, controlling. He squeezed just a little too hard. "You really scared us, Harrison," he said, his breath smelling of alcohol and mints. "We were about to call the sheriff. We thought you might have wandered off into the storm. You know how confused you get when your sugar is low. I do not have diabetes. My sugar is fine." But I nodded meekly. I am sorry, Brad. I just got turned around. The street signs, they were blurry." "Blurry," Brad repeated, looking at Emily. He nodded as if checking off a box on a clipboard. "Vision problems. Cognitive dissonance." "Got it." "Come on," Emily said, hooking her arm through mine. Her grip was like a vice. "Let's get some food in you. You look pale." "When was the last time you ate, Dad? Did you remember to eat lunch?" I had eaten a hearty steak sandwich at a diner near Roth's office 3 hours ago. I felt strong. I felt fueled. But I slumped my posture, letting my head hang forward. I don't remember," I mumbled. "Maybe toast yesterday." "Oh, Harrison." Brad sighed, shaking his head with exaggerated disappointment. "This is not good. This is really not good. You can't go on like this. Living alone in that big mausoleum, starving yourself, getting lost in your own neighborhood. It is dangerous." He was steering me toward the dining room, his hand firm on my back, pushing me forward. I felt like a prisoner being escorted to the interrogation room. "We are just looking out for you, Harrison," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper near my ear. "We just want you to be safe. That is all we want." I looked at the back of Emily's head as she walked in front of us. She was walking briskly, her heels clicking on the marble. She did not look back to see if I was stumbling. She just wanted me in the chair. She just wanted the scene to start. We entered the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the wedding china I had bought them. There were 3 places set. The room was dim, lit only by candles and the sconces on the wall. It felt funereal. "Sit here, Dad," Emily said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. Usually Brad sat there. Tonight they were putting me in the seat of honor, or the seat of the victim. I sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table, as if I needed it for balance. Brad sat to my right. Emily sat to my left. They had me flanked. There was no way out without going through one of them. Brad poured himself another drink from the decanter on the sideboard. He did not offer me anything. "Water for you, Dad," Emily said, placing a glass in front of me. "We don't want to mix anything with your medications." She said the word medications with a strange emphasis, as if it were a dirty secret. I looked at the water. I looked at the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the snowy night. I looked at the locked door in my mind. I was inside. The trap had snapped shut. Now I just had to survive long enough to spring my own. So Brad said, unfolding his napkin and placing it on his lap with a sharp snap. "Before we eat, Harrison, we need to talk. We have been doing a lot of thinking about your future." I looked up at him, widening my eyes, feigning innocence and fear. "My future?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough. "Yes," Emily said, reaching out to cover my hand with hers. Her hand was cold. "Dad, we can't let you live like this anymore. We have found a solution. A wonderful solution." I felt the recorder taping against my ribs, warm and solid. I took a sip of the water. "Tell me," I said. And so the execution began. Emily placed a slice of roast beef on my plate. It was swimming in a dark, rich gravy that smelled of rosemary and thyme. It looked like a meal prepared with love, the kind Martha used to make on Sundays when the snow was piling up against the window panes. But as I reached for my knife and fork, Emily's hand shot out and intercepted mine. Her fingers were cool and dry, and her grip was surprisingly firm. "No, Dad, let me do that for you," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. It was the voice one uses for a toddler who is about to make a mess, or a dog that needs to be calmed. "You know how your hands have been lately. We do not want you to hurt yourself." My hands have not shaken a day in my life. I have hands that can hold a plumb line steady in a gale-force wind. But I let my hand drop to the table. I let it lay there, palm open, looking useless and old against the white tablecloth. "Thank you, sweetie," I whispered, staring at the tablecloth. I did not want to make a mess. Emily picked up my knife and fork. She began to cut the meat into tiny bite-sized squares. The sound of the silver scraping against the fine china was rhythmic and grating. Scrape, cut, scrape, cut. She did it with a focused intensity, as if she were dissecting a specimen rather than serving her father dinner. "You are just so thin, Dad," she said, not looking at me, her eyes fixed on the meat. "Look at your wrists. You are wasting away. I bet you have not eaten a real meal all week, have you? You probably forgot. You get busy staring out the window, and you just forget to eat." I fought the urge to ball my fist. I had eaten lunch yesterday with the retired Builders Club at O'Toole's pub. We had pot roast sandwiches and laughed for 2 hours about the old days. I was not thin. I was sturdy. I was built like the oak trees in the front yard. But she was rewriting my reality in real time, narrating a version of Harrison Clark that was frail, forgetful, and starving. "I guess," I mumbled, watching her pile the cut meat into a mound in the center of my plate. "I guess I am not as hungry as I used to be. Sometimes I look at the clock, and it is already dark." "Exactly," Emily said, placing the fork down and pushing the plate toward me. "That is what we are worried about. Malnutrition affects the brain, Dad. It makes the confusion worse. Eat up. You need your strength." I picked up the fork. I took a bite. The meat was tender, perfectly cooked, but it tasted like sawdust in my mouth. I chewed slowly, forcing myself to swallow past the lump of anger in my throat. Brad cleared his throat. He had finished his first drink and poured another. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the scotch, watching me chew with a predatory gaze. "It is not just the food, Harrison," he said, his voice dropping into a register of grave concern. "It is everything. The house, the maintenance, and especially the finances. I kept my eyes on my plate. The finances, I asked, keeping my voice small. The market is a bloodbath right now, Brad said. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You probably have not checked your statements lately, have you? I checked them every morning at 8 a.m. My portfolio was conservative, diversified, and growing steadily. I knew exactly to the penny what I was worth. No, I said. I have trouble with the computer password. That is exactly the problem, Brad said, nodding at Emily. The technology is moving too fast. It is all algorithms now, Harrison. High-frequency trading, artificial intelligence. If you are not watching it every second, you can lose everything in a flash crash. And with the hackers these days, targeting seniors, it is a minefield. He took a sip of his drink, letting the fear hang in the air. We are worried about your exposure, he continued. You have accounts scattered all over. If someone got into your system, if you clicked the wrong link, you could be wiped out. Just last week, a client of mine lost his entire retirement because he opened a phishing email. Poof. Gone. I widened my eyes, feigning panic. Gone, all of it. All of it. Brad lied smoothly. He was good at this. He had the practiced cadence of a salesman closing a deal on a lemons car. And honestly, Harrison, you are not equipped to handle that kind of volatility anymore. You worked hard for that money. You built it with your bare hands. It would be a tragedy to see it vanish because you made a simple mistake. I looked at Emily. She was nodding in agreement, her face a mask of tragic concern. Brad is right, Dad, she said. It is too much pressure for you. You should be relaxing. You should be feeding the birds and resting. You should not be worrying about market caps and cybersecurity. I felt the recorder taping against my chest, capturing every lie, every manipulation. They were not just trying to steal my money. They were trying to strip me of my agency. They were trying to convince me that I was too stupid, too old, and too slow to protect myself. I decided it was time to give them what they wanted. I tried to lift the fork to my mouth again. I let my hand tremor. A little at first, then more violently. The fork rattled against the plate. I let my grip slacken. Clatter. The silver fork hit the china with a loud, jarring noise. A piece of meat flew off the plate and landed on the pristine white tablecloth, leaving a brown smear of gravy. I froze. I stared at the stain as if I had just committed a murder. Oh no, I whispered, my voice trembling. Oh no, I am sorry. I am so sorry. My hand, I looked up at them, making my eyes watery, pleading for forgiveness. I am so clumsy, I said. I am useless. For a second, silence filled the room, and then I saw it. It was brief, but it was unmistakable. Brad looked at Emily. He did not look concerned. He did not look sad. He smiled. It was a small, tight smile of absolute triumph. His eyes said everything. He is broken. He is done. We have him. Emily looked back at him and gave a barely perceptible nod. The signal had been given. The performance was over. It was time for the closing act. That is okay, Dad, Emily said, her voice brisk now, efficient. She stood up and came around the table. She took the napkin from my lap and dabbed at my mouth, though there was nothing there. It was a gesture of dominance, not care. Don't worry about the mess. The maid will get it tomorrow. She pulled my chair back. I think you have had enough excitement for one meal, she said. You are tired. I can see it in your eyes. You are fading, Dad. I stood up, letting her support my weight, leaning heavily on her arm. I am tired, I admitted. I am very tired, and that was the only true thing I had said all night. I was tired. I was tired of the lies. I was tired of the betrayal. I was tired of my own daughter looking at me like a cash cow to be slaughtered. "Let's go into the living room," Emily said, guiding me away from the table, away from the food I had barely touched. "It is warmer in there. We can sit by the fire." Brad stood up and followed us, grabbing a leather folder from the sideboard as he passed. I saw it. He thought he was being subtle, but I saw the hunger in his movement. "We will just have some tea," Emily cooed, walking me down the hallway. "Something to calm your nerves. And then Brad just has a few small things for you to sign. Just routine stuff, Dad. Just to help us take care of you." "Routine stuff," Brad echoed from behind. "Just so we can pick up your prescriptions. Just so we can make sure the lights stay on at your big house. Nothing to worry about." I shuffled along with them, my feet dragging on the marble. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay. Anything to help. I just want to rest." "We know, Dad," Emily said. "We know." We entered the living room. The fire was lit, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It looked cozy. It looked safe. But as Emily guided me to the armchair in the center of the room, I knew it was not a sanctuary. It was the kill box. "Sit down, Harrison," Brad said, placing the folder on the coffee table with a heavy thud. "Relax, we are going to take care of everything." I sat down. I buttoned my jacket, feeling the hard plastic of the recorder against my ribs. "I am ready," I thought. "Bring it on." Brad placed the leather folder on the coffee table with a heavy, deliberate thud. The sound seemed to swallow the crackling of the fire. He unzipped it slowly, the metal teeth hissing like a snake, and pulled out a stack of documents that was at least half an inch thick. The paper was crisp, bright white, and stapled at the top with a heavy-duty legal fastener. "Here we go," Brad said, uncapping a fountain pen. It was a Mont Blanc. I recognized it immediately because I had given it to him when he closed his first commercial sale 5 years ago. He had not closed another one since. "Just a few formalities, Harrison. We need to get these out of the way so Emily can pick up your blood pressure medication without dragging you to the pharmacy every time. And so we can talk to the doctors directly if you have one of your episodes." He slid the stack across the polished wood of the table until it rested directly in front of me. He positioned the pen on top of it, pointing toward my right hand. I looked at the document. Even in the dim light of the living room, even without my reading glasses, the bold, capitalized letters at the top of the page screamed the truth at me. It did not say medical proxy. It did not say HIPAA release form. It said durable general power of attorney. I spent 40 years in construction. I have negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I know what a contract looks like. I know the shape of the words. I know the density of the paragraphs. This was not a permission slip for a pharmacy. This was a total surrender. I squinted, leaning forward, playing the part of the failing old man. I let my mouth hang open slightly. "It looks very long," I said, my voice wavering. "For a prescription," Emily came over and sat on the arm of my chair. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her fingers digging into the tweed of my jacket. "It is just standard legalese, Dad," she said, her voice light and airy. "You know how lawyers are. They charge by the word. They have to cover every possibility. It just says that if you fall down or get sick, Brad and I can make sure you get the best care. That is all." I looked down at the page again. My eyes scanned the first paragraph. I saw the words real estate transactions. I saw banking and financial institution transactions. I saw unlimited gifting power. They were not just asking for permission to help me. They were asking for the legal right to become me. If I signed this, they could empty my bank accounts, sell my house, liquidate my stocks, and put me in a cardboard box, and it would all be completely legal. I felt the recorder against my chest. It was capturing every lie, every fraudulent misrepresentation. I don't know. I mumbled, pushing the paper away slightly. "I can't. The letters are swimming." I think I left my reading glasses in the truck. Or maybe at home, or maybe... I trailed off, looking confused. I saw Brad's jaw tighten. A vein in his temple began to throb. You don't need to read every line, Harrison, Brad said, his voice tight. It is boilerplate, standard template. We printed it off the state website. We are your family. Do you think we would put something in there that wasn't for your own good? I looked at him. I looked at the man who was wearing my sweater, drinking my scotch and trying to steal my life. I never sign anything I haven't read, I said, channeling a flicker of my old self, just enough to be annoying, just enough to be stubborn. Martha always said, read the fine print, Harrison. Don't bring Mom into this, Emily snapped. The sweetness cracked for a second, revealing the frustration underneath. Mom isn't here, Dad. We are. And we are trying to help you, but you are making it very difficult. I shrank back into the chair, feigning hurt. I am sorry, I whispered. I wish I had my glasses. Can we do this tomorrow? I can bring them tomorrow. Brad stood up. He did not just stand. He unfolded his large frame and loomed over me, blocking the light from the fire. He was using his size to intimidate. It was a cheap tactic, one I had seen 1,000 times on job sites. But usually, it was a foreman yelling about a deadline, not a son-in-law threatening an old man. We don't have time for tomorrow, Harrison, Brad growled. Why, I asked, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. What is the rush? Is the pharmacy closing? It isn't about the pharmacy, Brad shouted. The volume of his voice made Emily jump. He began to pace back and forth in front of the fireplace, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the room. It is about your safety, he said, trying to dial it back, but the anger was leaking through. The court, the doctors. They are worried, Harrison. If we don't have this paperwork signed tonight, the state could step in. Do you want the state to take over your life? Do you want some bureaucrat deciding where you live? I watched him pace. He was lying, of course. The state was not coming for me. He was the one coming for me, but he was desperate. The deadline for his gambling debt was Friday. He needed access to my liquidity by tomorrow morning, or his legs were going to get broken. I reached for the pen, my hand trembling violently. I hovered over the signature line. Okay, I said. I don't want the state. I want you kids to take care of me. Good, Brad breathed out, stopping his pacing. He leaned over, pointing to the line. Right there. Just sign your name. Harrison J. Clark. I touched the pen to the paper. A tiny dot of black ink appeared. Then I stopped. I pulled the pen back. But... Wait, I said. What now? Brad barked. Does this let you sell the house? I asked. Because I promised Martha I would never sell the house. Her rose garden. She worked so hard on the roses. Emily let out a noise that sounded like a growl of frustration. Dad. Nobody is selling the house. We just need to manage the bills. The electricity. The heat. It costs money to keep that place running, and you keep forgetting to pay the utility companies. I pay my bills on the first of the month every month via autodraft. I have never missed a payment in 40 years. I thought I paid them, I said meekly. You didn't. Emily shouted. You are forgetting everything. That is why we need this. Just sign the damn paper so we can save you from yourself. Her voice was shrill, echoing off the high ceilings. The mask of the loving daughter was gone. She was looking at me with pure contempt. She looked at me like I was a stubborn mule that refused to move. I looked at Brad. He had moved closer. He was now standing right next to my chair. He smelled of sweat and expensive cologne. Harrison, pick up the pen, he said. His voice was low, menacing. I don't feel well, I said, dropping the pen on the table. It rolled across the document. I think I need to go home. I need to lie down. Brad slammed his hand down on the table. The heavy wood shook. The crystal vase on the mantelpiece rattled. "You are not going anywhere," he yelled. "You are not leaving this house until that paper is signed." I looked at him, letting the fear show on my face, but inside I was calculating. I had it. I had the threat. I had the coercion. I had the lies about the document's content. I had Emily screaming at me. I had everything I needed to bury them. But I needed one more thing. I needed them to admit the crime. I needed them to say it out loud. "Why are you yelling?" I whimpered, shrinking away from him. "You are scaring me, Brad. You said this was for medicine. Why are you so angry?" "Because we don't have time for your senile bullshit," Brad roared. He grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. He shook me. Not gently. Violently. "Listen to me, old man," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You are going to sign this paper. And then we are going to drive you to a nice place where you can sleep all day and look at the wall. And we are going to fix the mess you made. We are going to take that money you are sitting on and put it to actual use." He admitted it. He admitted he was taking the money. He admitted he was sending me away. Emily did not stop him. She did not tell him to take his hands off her father. She stood there, arms crossed, watching with cold indifference. Brad shoved the pen back into my hand. He wrapped his large fingers around my hand, forcing my grip. "Sign it," he ordered. "Sign it, or I will break your fingers and sign it for you." I looked at the pen. I looked at the paper. I looked at my daughter, who was watching her husband threaten to break my bones. I shrank back into the leather chair, letting my shoulders collapse inward until I felt small and withered. The threat of physical violence from Brad hung in the air like smoke, but instead of meeting it with force, I decided to use it. I decided to lean into the frailty they were so desperate to see. I let the tears that had been gathering in the corners of my eyes spill over. They were real tears born of frustration and heartbreak, but I let them fall for a different purpose. I let my breathing hitch, turning into a jagged, wet sound that filled the silent room. "Martha," I wailed, my voice cracking and pitching high. I looked around the room frantically, my eyes darting from the fireplace to the window to the empty hallway. "Martha, where did you go? You said you were just going to the kitchen. Why have you been gone so long?" I saw Brad recoil. He took a step back, his hand releasing my shoulder as if he had been burned. The aggression in his face was replaced by a look of sheer bewilderment. He looked at Emily, his eyes wide. "He thinks she is here," Brad whispered, though he did not need to whisper. In his mind, I was already gone, lost in a fog of dementia. I kept going. I reached out a trembling hand toward the empty air, grasping at nothing. "It is so cold in here, Martha," I cried. "Please bring me my sweater. The blue one. The one you knit. I do not like this place. These people are shouting at me." Emily stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She was watching me with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a lab rat that had finally stopped running the maze. There was no pity in her eyes. There was no daughterly concern. There was only relief. "See," she said to Brad, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I told you. It is the sundowning. He gets worse at night. He is completely dissociating." I buried my face in my hands, sobbing loudly now, rocking back and forth in the chair. It was a performance that would have shamed an Oscar winner, but it was grounded in a truth so painful it nearly choked me. I really was talking to Martha in my head. I was telling her, "Look at them, Martha. Look at what they have become. I am so sorry." "Mom is dead, Dad," Emily said, but she said it without weight, just stating a fact to move the process along. "She died 8 months ago." "You are at my house." I ignored her. I looked up at Brad, my eyes swimming with tears, my expression vacant and terrified. "Are you the doctor?" I asked him. My voice was a whisper. "Did you come to help me find her?" Brad let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging. The tension of the physical confrontation drained out of him, replaced by a smug arrogance. He capped the pen and tossed it onto the table next to the document. He ran a hand through his hair and chuckled. It was a dark, ugly sound. "Yeah, Harrison," he said, playing along with a mocking smirk. "I am the doctor, and I can help you find her, but you have to sign the paper first. That is the rule." He believed it. They both believed it. They had bought the lie so completely because it was the lie they wanted to be true. It was easier for them to rob a senile old man than to rob a father who was looking them in the eye. I sniffled, wiping my nose on the sleeve of my expensive jacket, a gesture I knew would repulse Emily. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling. "I will sign, if the doctor says so. But I need a minute. My head is spinning." "Take a minute," Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. He turned his back to me and walked over to where Emily was standing. I slumped further into the chair, making myself look as small and harmless as possible. I closed my eyes, pretending to drift off or calm down, but my ears were straining, tuning out the crackle of the fire and focusing entirely on the two people standing 6 feet away. They thought I was out of it. They thought I was lost in 1998. They lowered their voices, but in the quiet room, sound carried perfectly. "He is totally gone," Brad whispered. "Did you see his eyes? There is nobody home, Em. This is going to be easier than I thought." Emily let out a sigh of irritation. "It is pathetic," she hissed. "Look at him, drooling on his jacket, talking to ghosts." I was not drooling, but I let my jaw hang slack. I felt the recorder taping against my chest, warm and steady, a silent witness to their cruelty. "We need to get that signature and get him out of here," Emily continued, her voice dropping even lower, unaware that the high-quality microphone in my pocket was picking up every syllable. "I cannot have him here tonight, Brad. I mean it." "We can't just kick him out in the snow," Brad whispered back, though his tone suggested he was considering it. "We have to wait until the morning to file the papers." "No," Emily insisted. Her voice had a sharp, venomous edge I had never heard before. It was the voice of a stranger. "I called Sunny Meadows this afternoon. They have a bed in the secure ward. They said they do emergency intakes for cases like this. Severe dementia. Aggressive behavior." "Aggressive," Brad snorted. "He can barely lift a fork." "It does not matter," Emily said. "We just need to get him there. Once he is signed in, he is their problem. We can drop him off tonight." "I already packed his bag. It is in the garage." My heart stopped beating for a second. She had packed my bag. She had planned this down to the minute. While I was putting on my tie thinking about pot roast, she was packing my bag to send me to a state-run facility known for neglect. But it was what she said next that truly killed the man I used to be. "Look at him," she whispered, casting a glance over her shoulder. I could feel her eyes on me. "He smells Brad. He smells like old man, like decay. I cannot stand it. I do not want that smell in my house. I do not want him around the new furniture. Just get him to sign the damn paper so we can dump him and be done with it. I want my life back. I want his money, and I want him gone." The words hung in the air, suspended in the silence of the room. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not financial desperation. It was hatred. It was a complete and total rejection of my existence. To her, I was not a person. I was a rotting piece of meat that stood between her and a payday. I sat there, eyes closed, listening to the fire pop. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and agonizing, as if my heart were actually breaking. It was the death of hope. It was the death of the illusion that love is unconditional. But as the pain washed over me, it took something with it. It took the hesitation. It took the guilt. It took the last shred of fatherly instinct that wanted to protect her from the consequences of her actions. I opened my eyes. I looked at the ceiling, blinking away the tears. The tears were gone now. My eyes were dry. I slowly sat up. I adjusted my cuffs. I reached into my pocket and felt the outline of the pen I had brought with me, not the one Brad had offered. I was no longer Harrison, the confused father. I was Harrison, the contractor, and I had just found the rot in the foundation. There was only one way to fix rot this deep. You do not patch it. You do not paint over it. You tear the whole house down. "I am ready," I croaked, keeping my voice low, masking the steel that had just forged itself in my spine. "Doctor, I am ready to sign." Brad turned around, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "Excellent, Harrison," he said, walking back toward me. "Let's get this over with." Yes, I thought. Let's get this over with. He had no idea that the signature he was about to get was not the one he wanted. He was expecting a surrender. He was about to get a declaration of war. I held the pen hovering over the signature line, the tip trembling just a fraction of an inch above the paper. Brad was practically vibrating with anticipation, his eyes locked on the nib, as if he could mentally force it down onto the page. He smelled of scotch and victory. To him, this was just a transaction, the closing of a deal that would erase his debts and fund his lifestyle for the next 20 years. To me, it was the moment I had to steel myself for the final plunge. I let my hand drop to the table, the pen clattering softly against the wood. Brad flinched, his jaw tightening with a flash of impatience he could barely suppress. "Wait," I murmured, my voice thinned by the performance of frailty I was maintaining. I need to know." "Know what?" Harrison Brad asked, the edges of his voice sharpening. "We went over this. It is for your medicine." "No," I said, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. "The place, you said, Sunny Meadows. Is it nice? I do not want to go to a hospital. I hate hospitals. Martha died in a hospital." I saw Emily shift by the fireplace. She crossed her arms, her nails digging into her cashmere sleeves. She looked annoyed, like a parent dealing with a child stalling at bedtime. But Brad, ever the salesman, saw an objection he needed to overcome. He put on his best real estate smile, the one he used when he was trying to sell a house with a cracked foundation. "It is not a hospital," Harrison Brad said, his voice dropping into a smooth, comforting baritone. "It is a resort. Honest to God, it is better than a hotel. It is 5 stars all the way." He pulled a chair closer and sat down, leaning in as if sharing a wonderful secret. "Picture this," he said, using his hands to paint the air. "It is located on 50 acres of rolling hills right near the water. You will have your own private suite. Not a room, a suite. With a balcony overlooking the lake. You like the water, right? You used to take the boat out." I nodded slowly, keeping my expression vacant, but inside my mind was racing back to the dossier Roth had opened on his desk just hours ago. I remembered the photographs. Sunny Meadows was not on 50 acres of rolling hills. It was a converted industrial warehouse in a rundown district on the far south side, sandwiched between a salvage yard and a chemical plant. There was no lake. There was a retention pond filled with stagnant water and shopping carts. And the staff, Brad continued, warming to his lie. "They are incredible. You will have a private nurse assigned just to you 24 hours a day. Someone to make sure you are comfortable, to bring you your coffee, to read the paper to you if your eyes are tired. It is concierge service, Harrison. Top of the line." I remembered the inspection reports Roth had highlighted in yellow. Severe understaffing. Ratio of 1 aide to 30 residents during night shifts. Citations for residents left in soiled linens for 12 hours. Citations for medication errors. Citations for unexplained bruising. "Private nurse," I repeated, letting a note of hope creep into my voice. "That sounds expensive, Brad. I do not know if I can afford a private nurse." "The money. I have to be careful with the money." Brad laughed, a dismissive, easy sound. "Don't you worry about the money, Harrison. That is what we are here for. We will handle the finances. You have worked hard your whole life. You deserve the best. And yes, it is exclusive. It costs a fortune, but you are worth it. We are going to make sure you get the platinum package." He was lying with such ease, such fluidity, that it was almost impressive. He was painting a picture of a retirement paradise, a place where I would live out my days in dignity and comfort. But the math in my head was screaming. Sunny Meadows cost $4,000 a month. That was the base rate for a shared room in the secure ward, which is where they intended to put me. $4,000 a month to rot. Meanwhile, my estate was worth $18 million. My investment income alone generated nearly $700,000 a year. They were going to spend $50,000 a year on my care and pocket the other $650,000. And that was just the income. Once they liquidated the principal, once they sold the house and the stocks, they would have millions to play with. They would pay off Brad's gambling debts by Tuesday. They would buy a new house by Christmas. And I would be eating cold oatmeal in a place that smelled of bleach and despair, wondering why my family never visited. I looked at Emily. She was studying her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew. Of course she knew. She had packed the bag. She had called the facility. She knew exactly what kind of hellhole she was sending her father to. "Emily," I said softly. She looked up, startled. "Is it true?" I asked. "Is it really that nice? Would Mom like it?" It was a cruel question, I knew. I was using Martha's memory as a weapon. But I needed to see how far she would go. I needed to see if there was any limit to her betrayal. Emily stared at me for a long moment. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt. Maybe. Or perhaps just irritation that I was dragging this out. "Yes, Dad," she said, her voice flat. "It is beautiful. Mom would love it. She would want you to go there. She would want you to be safe." That was the final nail. She had invoked her mother to seal my fate. She had used the memory of the woman who loved me most to condemn me to a slow death. I felt a coldness settle over me, absolute and final. There was no going back now. There was no saving them. They had crossed every line. They had violated every bond. I looked back at Brad. He was tapping the table next to the document, his patience fraying again. "So, you see Harrison," he said. "It is a no-brainer. You sign this, we drive you over there tonight, and you wake up tomorrow in luxury. No more worrying about the stove. No more wandering in the snow. Just peace and quiet. Peace and quiet. The peace of the grave." I took a deep, shuddering breath. I let my hand shake as I reached for the pen again. I watched Brad's eyes light up. He looked like a wolf watching a lamb step into the clearing. He could taste the money. He could feel the relief of his debts vanishing. I gripped the pen. It felt heavy, substantial. "Okay," I whispered. "I want to go to the lake. I want to see the water." "You will, Harrison?" Brad promised, practically drooling. "You will see it tomorrow morning. Just sign right there, next to the X." I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip touched the fiber. Ink bled into a tiny black dot. I paused one last time. I looked up at Brad. He was smiling. It was a smirk, really. A look of supreme arrogance. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted the old builder. He thought I was a senile old fool signing away his life for a promise of a view that didn't exist. I held his gaze. For a second I let the mask slip. Just a fraction. I let him see the clarity in my eyes. I let him see the hardness. He blinked, confused. The smile faltered for a microsecond. He sensed something. A shift in the air pressure. A vibration in the floorboards. But greed is a powerful blinder. He shook it off. He pointed at the line again. "Sign it, Harrison," he urged. I looked down at the paper. Durable power of attorney. I tightened my grip on the pen. My hand stopped shaking. I am ready, I thought. And then I began to write. But I did not write my name. I held the pen frozen just above the signature line. The ink had barely dried on the tiny dot I had made a microscopic testament to my hesitation. Brad was practically leaning over me, his breath hitching, waiting for the loops and lines that would sign my life away. "Wait," I said again. Brad let out a noise that was halfway between a groan and a snarl. "What is it now, Harrison? Just sign the damn paper." I looked up at him, keeping my eyes wide and innocent, but inside I was sharpening the knife. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. I needed them to confirm the financial fraud. I needed them to admit that my money was not going into a trust or a savings account, but straight into the black hole of Brad's incompetence. I want to make sure the money is safe," I stammered. "The house, if you sell the house, that is a lot of money. $4 million. Martha always said we should put it in bonds. Safe bonds." Brad rolled his eyes. "Bonds pay nothing, Harrison. Inflation eats them alive. We are going to put it somewhere much better." Where, I asked, my voice trembling. Not in the stock market. You said the market was a bloodbath." Brad exchanged a look with Emily. He was getting careless. He was so close to the finish line that he was starting to sprint before the gun went off. He wanted to brag. He wanted to show off his business acumen to the senile old man who had never respected him. "It is not the stock market," Brad said, puffing out his chest. "It is real estate. Commercial development. The only real wealth builder left in this country." "Commercial development," I repeated, as if trying to grasp a complex concept. Like your condo project. The one downtown. How is that going, Brad?" It was the bait. I knew exactly how the project was going. Roth had pulled the permits, or rather, the lack of permits. The project was a hole in the ground on a lot that had been foreclosed on 3 months ago. Brad had taken deposits from investors and spent them on leasing a Porsche and gambling in Vegas. He was running a Ponzi scheme, paying old investors with new money, and the music had stopped. He needed my $18 million to restart the music before the investors realized the band had gone home. Brad's eyes lit up. It was the reaction of a desperate gambler who thinks he just drew an ace. "It is going incredible, Harrison." He lied, his voice booming with false confidence. "That is actually where we are going to put the house money, into the Phase 2 capital raise." "Phase 2, I asked. "Exactly." Brad said, pacing a little, now energized by his own lie. "We need liquidity by tomorrow morning to secure the steel contracts. It is a bridge loan, essentially. But the returns, Harrison, you will double your money in 6 months. Double it. We are talking $8 million back on a $4 million investment." "Double in 6 months," I whispered. "That sounds like magic." "It is leverage," Brad corrected, grinning. "It is how the big boys play. And since I am the developer, I can get you in on the ground floor. No fees, just pure profit. We are going to be rich, Harrison. We are going to set you up for life. And Emily, we can finally buy that summer house in the Hamptons she wants." I looked at Emily. She was nodding, caught up in the fantasy. She actually believed him. She thought her husband was a genius who just needed one lucky break. She did not know she was married to a con artist who was about to drag her down with him. Or maybe she did know, and she did not care as long as the checks cleared. But the steel contracts, I pressed, playing the confused contractor. "Do you have the permits for the steel?" I thought the city halted the permits. Brad froze. He stopped pacing. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "How did you know about the permits?" I read it in the paper," I lied quickly. "Or maybe Martha told me. Someone told me." Brad relaxed. He chuckled. "Old news, Harrison. That was a clerical error. We fixed that months ago. We are fully green-lit. We just need the cash injection to mobilize the cranes. Tomorrow. We need the money tomorrow. Tomorrow. That was the deadline. The loan sharks were coming tomorrow. So, if I sign this, you will sell my house and give the money to the steel guys tomorrow, I summarized. Essentially, yes, Brad said. It is an investment, Harrison. A legacy for your grandchildren. Grandchildren, I said softly. Yes, Emily chimed in. Think of the grandchildren, Dad. There were no grandchildren, and if Brad had his way, there would never be any inheritance for them either. It would all go to pay off Vig to a bookie in Cicero. I had it. I had it all. The coercion, the abuse, the admission of intent to misuse funds, the admission of fraud. He had just confessed to securities fraud on tape. He had promised 100% return in 6 months on a project that did not exist. I looked at the document again. It was heavy with the weight of their betrayal. Okay, I said. Okay. I understand now. Good, Brad said, exhaling. Sign it, Harrison. Let's pop some champagne. I picked up the pen. I held it firmly this time. The tremor was gone. The hesitation was gone. I looked at the signature line. Harrison J. Clark. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the wood fire and the expensive perfume and the fear. And then I asked one last question. A question that was not for the recording. A question for me. Brad, I said, looking up at him. Yeah. Do you remember what I told you when you asked for Emily's hand? Brad blinked, surprised by the shift in topic. What? I don't... That was 10 years ago, Harrison. Who cares? I care, I said. I told you that I built my life on foundations, that if you cheat the foundation, the house falls down. Do you remember that? Brad rolled his eyes. Sure, Harrison. Foundations. Very deep. Sign the paper. He did not remember. He did not care. He thought foundations were just concrete poured in a hole. He did not understand that a foundation is a promise that you will hold the weight, a promise that you will not crack. I looked at Emily. And you, Emily, I said. Do you remember what I gave you for your 16th birthday? She sighed, checking her watch. Dad, really? Can we do memory lane later? I gave you a toolbox, I said. A real one. With a hammer and a level and a wrench. And I told you that you can fix anything if you have the right tools and the patience to see the problem clearly. So what? She snapped. So I said, my voice hardening, shedding the husk of the old man like a snake shedding its skin. I am looking at the problem clearly, Emily, and I have the right tool. I dropped the pen. It hit the document with a final definitive thwack. I am not signing this, Brad, I said. The room went silent. The air pressure dropped. What did you say? Brad whispered. I said no, I repeated. I am not signing it, and I am not going to Sunny Meadows. Brad's face turned a mottled red. The veins in his neck bulged. He lunged forward, grabbing the lapels of my jacket, hauling me halfway out of the chair. You senile old bat, he roared, shaking me. You do not have a choice. You are signing this paper if I have to break every finger in your hand. I looked him in the eye. I did not blink. I did not flinch. And then I smiled. It was a cold smile. A builder's smile when he sees the demolition charge is set. Let go of me, Brad, I said, or I will add assault to the list of felonies you have committed in the last 20 minutes. He froze. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time all night. He saw the clarity in my eyes. He saw the strength in my jaw. He saw that the old man was gone, and in his place was the man who had buried him. Brad released my lapels as if my jacket had suddenly turned into burning coals. He stumbled back a step, his heel catching on the edge of the expensive Persian rug, and he nearly went down. He caught himself on the arm of the sofa, staring at me with eyes that were no longer predatory, but wide with the dawn of a terrible realization. He looked like a man who had just struck a match to check the fuel level in a gas tank and realized too late what the fumes smelled like. I did not move immediately. I let the silence stretch. I let it fill the room like expanding foam, choking off the oxygen, choking off their lies. I reached up and brushed the lapels of my tweed jacket, smoothing out the wrinkles Brad's sweaty hands had left. I adjusted my tie, the silk knot tight and perfect against my throat. I sat up straighter, my spine aligning vertebrae by vertebrae until I was sitting, as I had sat in boardroom meetings for 40 years, erect, imposing, immovable. The tremor in my hands was gone. The vacant, watery look in my eyes vanished, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who had fired foremen for cutting corners and sued developers for non-payment. I looked at my hands, turning them over, inspecting them. They were strong hands, capable hands, and they were done playing the victim. I turned my gaze to Emily. She was standing by the fireplace, one hand covering her mouth, her face drained of all color. She looked like a ghost in her own living room. She had seen this look before. She had seen it when she was a teenager and tried to lie about where she had been. She knew this wasn't the look of a senile old man. It was the look of her father. "Emily," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "You were right about one thing." She didn't answer. She couldn't. She just stared, her chest heaving with shallow, panicked breaths. "I am old." I continued enunciating every syllable with precision. "My joints ache when it rains. I can't run as fast as I used to. But there is one thing I am not. I am not confused." I stood up. I didn't use the armrests for leverage. I didn't groan. I stood up in one fluid motion, towering over the coffee table where the fraudulent document lay like a dead thing. "I remember everything, Emily," I said, taking a step toward her. "I remember that I have never, not once in 20 years, forgotten to take my blood pressure medication. I remember that I use a digital calendar, not a paper one, so I never miss an appointment. And I remember that I switched the house to electric heating in '98 because your mother was afraid of gas leaks. So tell me, sweetheart, how did I leave a gas stove on when I don't have one?" Emily let out a small, strangled whimper. She backed away until her heels hit the hearth. "And you, Brad?" I said, turning my head slowly to look at him. He was still gripping the sofa, his knuckles white. "You talked about the view at Sunny Meadows. You talked about the lake." I walked over to the window and pulled back the heavy velvet curtain, looking out at the snow falling on the dark street. "I know exactly what Sunny Meadows is," I said, not looking at them, letting my reflection in the dark glass speak for me. "It is a warehouse for the indigent. It is a place where people go to be forgotten. It has been cited by the State Health Department 14 times in the last 3 years for patient neglect, malnutrition, and unsanitary conditions. There is no lake, Brad. There is a retention pond behind a chemical plant. And the only private nurse I would get there is the coroner when my heart finally gives out from the stress." I turned back to face them. The room felt smaller now. The luxury furnishings, the art on the walls, the crystal chandelier, it all looked cheap. It looked like a stage set that was falling apart under the harsh light of the truth. "You were going to send me there," I said, my voice rising just a fraction, allowing a sliver of the rage I felt to bleed through. "You packed a bag. You called the intake coordinator. You were going to drive me there tonight, drop me off like a stray dog, and come back here to drink my scotch and spend my money. That is not—" Brad started, but his voice failed him. He licked his lips, desperate for a lie that would work, but he was out of ammunition. "It is exactly what it is," I cut him off. "You planned to declare me incompetent. You planned to liquidate my estate. You planned to pay off your gambling debts with the money I spent a lifetime earning with sweat and blood. How do you know about the debts? Brad whispered. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by the terror of a man who realizes he is standing on a trapdoor. I know everything, I said. I know about the $1.2 million due on Friday. I know about the hard money lenders. I know about the foreclosure notices you have been hiding from Emily. I looked at my daughter. She blinked, her eyes darting to her husband. Foreclosure, she breathed. Brad, what is he talking about? He didn't tell you, I asked, feigning surprise. Oh, Emily. He gambled it all away. The commission from the last sale. The equity in this house. He leveraged everything. Why do you think he was so desperate to get my signature tonight? He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save his kneecaps. Emily looked at Brad, horror dawning on her face. You said it was for the investment property. You said we were liquid. He lied to you, I said. Just like you lied to me. You two deserve each other. You are both parasites. But at least he is just a thief. You are a traitor. You are my flesh and blood, and you looked me in the eye and told me my wife would want me to rot in a state facility. Tears streamed down Emily's face, but this time they weren't for show. They were tears of shock, of ruin. Dad, please, I didn't know about the debts. I thought you needed help. Stop it, I barked. Do not insult my intelligence, not anymore. You talked about my smell. You said I smelled like decay. You said you wanted your life back. You said you wanted my money and you wanted me gone. Her mouth clamped shut. She remembered. She knew she had said it. She knew there was no walking that back. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. Brad flinched, perhaps thinking I was reaching for a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out the digital recorder. It was small, sleek, and black. I held it up so they could both see it. The red LED light pulsed rhythmically. Blink, blink, blink. It was the heartbeat of their destruction. I walked back to the coffee table and placed the recorder gently on top of the unsigned power of attorney document. It sat there, a technological grenade that had just pulled its own pin. I have been recording since I walked through that door, I said. Every lie. Every threat, every admission of conspiracy to commit fraud, every threat of physical violence. It is all here. In high-definition digital audio. Brad stared at the recorder as if it were a radioactive isotope. He looked like he wanted to grab it, to smash it, but he was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his mistake. You can't record us in our own home, he stammered, grasping at legal straws he didn't understand. That is illegal. It is inadmissible. Actually, I said, buttoning my coat, preparing to leave this mausoleum of lies. Illinois is a two-party consent state for private conversations, that is true. But there is an exception for recording evidence of a crime in progress, especially when it involves elder abuse, extortion, and threat of bodily harm. And since you threatened to break my fingers 5 minutes ago, Brad, I think the district attorney will be very interested in hearing this. The color that had left Brad's face did not return. He looked sick. He looked like a man watching his life flush down the drain. And just so you know, I added, delivering the final tactical strike. This device is Bluetooth enabled. It has been streaming a live feed to a cloud server since I turned it on. My lawyer, Mr. Roth, has been listening to this entire dinner. He has heard everything. And right now he is doing two things. He is filing for a restraining order, and he is calling the police. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. The fire popped a loud crack that made Emily jump. I looked at them one last time. My daughter, the traitor. My son-in-law, the con artist. They looked small. They looked pathetic. They looked like children who had been caught playing with matches while the house burned down around them. I picked up the recorder and slipped it back into my pocket. "I am leaving now," I said. "Do not try to stop me. Do not try to follow me." I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and yet it was the easiest. I walked toward the foyer, my footsteps heavy and sure on the marble floor. I did not shuffle. I did not stumble. I walked like a man who had just reclaimed his life. I reached the front door and unlocked the deadbolt. I unlocked the handle. I pulled the heavy door open, and the cold wind rushed in, cleansing the house of the stench of their greed. I stepped out into the night, leaving the door wide open behind me, letting the snow blow into their perfect, fraudulent life. I stood on the porch, the winter air biting at my exposed face, but the heat of the confrontation still radiated from my skin. I had one foot on the top step, ready to descend into the night, but the sound of frantic movement behind me stopped me cold. "You are not taking that." It was Brad. The paralysis of shock had broken, replaced by the violent desperation of a man who sees his entire existence crumbling. He lunged across the foyer. It was a clumsy, panicked motion, his expensive loafers skidding on the marble. He wasn't thinking. He was reacting. He slammed into me from behind his weight, pinning me against the heavy oak doorframe. "Give it to me!" he screamed, spit flying his hands, clawing at my coat, trying to rip it open to get to the inside pocket. "Give me the recording, you old bastard!" I grunted as my shoulder hit the wood, but I didn't go down. I planted my boots on the threshold. I grabbed his wrists that had never done a day of hard labor in their life, and I shoved him back. I used the leverage of the doorframe and the strength that 40 years of hauling lumber had built. Brad stumbled backward, flailing, and crashed into the hallway table. A vase shattered. "It is too late, Brad," I shouted, my voice booming over his heavy breathing. I reached into my other pocket, the one he hadn't gone for, and pulled out my smartphone. The screen was glowing bright in the dim entryway. I held it up like a shield. The call timer was counting up. 4712. The name on the screen was Clear Roth, attorney. "Look," I commanded. "Look at the phone." Brad froze his eyes, locking onto the screen. "Mr. Roth hasn't just been listening," I said, my voice steady and hard as granite. "He has been recording the backup feed directly to his secure server. It's streaming live to the cloud. Even if you smash the recorder, even if you smash this phone, even if you smash me, the file is already safe. It is done." Brad stared at the timer ticking away the seconds of his freedom. 4017. The fight drained out of him instantly. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been severed. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor amidst the shards of the broken vase. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken and small. "Why would you do this? We needed help. We were going to lose everything." Emily stepped out from the living room doorway. Her face was streaked with mascara, her perfect facade ruined. She looked at her husband on the floor, then at me. And in her eyes, I didn't see remorse. I saw calculation. She was running the numbers. She realized the jail time was a problem, but the immediate problem was still the money. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, trying to summon that manipulative sweetness one last time. "Okay, you made your point. You are angry. We get it. We messed up. But you can't send Brad to jail. You can't ruin our lives over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed, a dry, harsh sound. "You tried to lock me in a cage. We were desperate," she cried. "The loan sharks. They are real, Dad. If we don't pay them tomorrow, they will hurt us. They will hurt Brad. Please, we can fix the legal stuff later. But the money? You have $18 million. You can write a check tonight. You can save us. Please, for family." I looked at her. I really looked at her. My daughter. She had just watched her husband assault me. She knew I had evidence of their crimes, and she was still asking for the check. She truly believed that the money was the only thing that mattered. She thought that because I was her father, I was obligated to be her ATM until the day I died. The money, I said quietly. You want to talk about the money? Yes, Emily breathed, stepping closer, seeing a crack in the armor. Yes. Just help us this one last time. Pay off the debt. We will never ask for anything again. I promise. I believe you, I said. You will never ask for anything again, because there is nothing to ask for. Brad looked up from the floor, his eyes narrowing. What? I stepped back into the house, letting the door drift shut behind me to block the wind. I wanted them to hear this clearly. I wanted no wind to carry the words away. You wanted my $18 million, I said. You wanted the house. You wanted the portfolio. You spent so much time counting it, planning how to spend it, betting your life on it. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was screaming. It is gone, I said. What do you mean gone? Emily shrieked, her voice cracking. You have it. I saw the statements. I saw the balances. I had it yesterday, I corrected her. But this morning at 8 a.m., before I even received Roth's text, I sat in his office, and I signed a stack of documents much thicker than the one you tried to force on me tonight. I looked down at Brad. I established an irrevocable charitable remainder trust, I said, enunciating every syllable. Do you know what that is, Brad? You are a real estate agent. You should know. Brad shook his head dumbly, his mouth hanging open. It means the assets no longer belong to me, I explained. I transferred the deed to my house. I transferred the brokerage accounts. I transferred the savings. All $18 million plus the real estate now belongs to the legal entity of the trust. But you can undo it, Emily stammered, her hands shaking. You can change it back. You can fix it. Irrevocable, I said. That means it cannot be changed. It cannot be amended. It cannot be revoked. Not by me. Not by you. Not by a judge. It is set in stone. Who? Brad croaked, choking on the words. Who gets it? I retain a life interest in the income, I said. The trust pays me a monthly allowance generated by the interest. Enough for my groceries, my heating bill, and maybe a trip to Italy. I will live comfortably. But the principal, the 18 million... I smiled. It was the smile of a man who had burned the ships so there could be no retreat. The sole beneficiary of the trust is the Chicago Children's Hospital, I said. Specifically, the pediatric oncology wing, where they treated your mother's cancer 20 years ago. When my heart stops beating, every single penny goes to them. Not one dime goes to my estate. Not one dime goes to probate. I leaned in closer to Emily, looking deep into her eyes. And not one dime goes to you. The scream that tore out of Emily's throat was primal. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a wounded animal realizing the trap had broken its leg. You can't do that, she screamed, lunging at me, grabbing my lapels. That is my money. I am your daughter. You can't give my inheritance to a hospital. You are crazy. You are sick. I am perfectly sane, I said calmly, removing her hands from my coat. And I just made the best investment of my life. I invested in children who actually want to live instead of children who are waiting for their father to die. Brad made a sound like a deflating tire. He slumped fully onto the floor, putting his head between his knees. He knew what this meant. There would be no bailout. There would be no check tomorrow. The loan sharks were coming, and he had nothing to offer them but his empty pockets. You killed us, Brad whispered into the marble floor. You just killed us. No, I said. You killed yourselves. I just refused to pay for the funeral. Emily collapsed onto the floor next to him, sobbing hysterically. Daddy, please. You have to undo it. You have to help us. I am helping you, I said coldly. I am teaching you the lesson I should have taught you 20 years ago. You have to earn your life, Emily. You can't steal it." I turned my back on them. They were a tableau of ruin on the floor of their foyer, two people who had everything and lost it all to greed. I opened the front door. The wind swirled in, carrying snow onto the expensive rug. "Goodbye," I said. I stepped out onto the porch, and then I heard it. In the distance, cutting through the silence of the suburban snowfall, the wail of sirens. Wee woo, wee woo. They were getting louder. They were getting closer. Roth. He had timed it perfectly. I walked down the steps to my truck. I did not look back. I brushed the snow off the door handle and climbed inside. As I started the engine, blue and red lights washed over the street, bouncing off the white snow. 3 squad cars turned the corner, speeding toward the house. The police weren't coming to save me. I had already saved myself. They were coming to take out the trash. I sat in the cab of my truck, but I did not put it in gear. I watched the scene unfold through the windshield, like a spectator at a drive-in movie theater. The blue and red strobe lights cut through the falling snow, painting the white lawn in violent alternating colors. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Doors slammed, boots crunched on the gravel. 4 uniformed officers and 2 detectives in plain clothes marched up the driveway. They did not knock. Roth had given them probable cause. They knew there was a hostage situation, or at least an attempted one. I rolled down my window just an inch. I wanted to hear. I needed to hear. The front door was still open where I had left it. I heard the shout. "Police, show me your hands." It was a guttural, commanding roar. I saw shadows moving frantically in the foyer. I saw Brad's silhouette back away, hands raised, stumbling over his own expensive furniture. I decided to get out. I needed to see the end. I walked back up the steps, standing in the doorway like a ghost. Brad was on his knees. The arrogance was gone. The aggression was gone. He was weeping. Snot ran down his face as he begged the officer not to hurt him. One of the detectives, a woman with a face like carved stone, was reading him his rights. But she added something else, something Roth had dug up in the last hour. She mentioned a warrant from Nevada, wire fraud, interstate racketeering. Brad was not just a bad gambler. He was a fugitive. He had been running a Ponzi scheme across state lines for years. Tonight was just the end of the road. I watched the handcuffs click. That sound, metal on metal. It echoed through the cavernous house. It was the sound of consequences arriving. And then the movement caught my eye. Emily. She was pressed against the wall, trembling. She looked at Brad handcuffed on the floor, and I saw the calculation happen in real time. She realized he was finished. She realized the money was gone. She realized her only lifeline was the man standing in the doorway. Me. She threw herself at me. It was not a hug. It was a tackle of desperation. She grabbed my legs, sliding down until she was kneeling on the cold marble, ruining her designer pants. "Dad," she screamed. "Dad, help me." I did not know. I swear to God, I did not know. He lied to me too. He tricked me. She looked up at me, mascara streaming down her cheeks, making her look like a tragic clown. "Please, Daddy, tell them to stop. Tell them I am innocent. I am your little girl. I am a victim here. He made me do it. He made me sign those papers. I was scared of him." I looked down at the top of her head. I remembered braiding that hair when she was 6. I remembered buying her the first car. I remembered paying for the wedding dress she wore to marry the man she was now throwing under the bus. I searched my heart for anger. I expected to feel rage. I expected to want to scream at her. But there was nothing. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, gray pile of ash. I did not hate her. I pitied her. She was a hollow thing filled only with want. I reached down. For a second she stopped crying, thinking I was going to pull her up, thinking I was going to save her like I always did. But I just peeled her fingers off my coat. One by one. Her grip was weak. "Emily," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a stranger. "You were not tricked. You were not a victim. You knew about the nursing home. You knew about the conservatorship. You knew because you packed the bag. You knew because you mocked me for smelling like decay." "No," she sobbed, shaking her head violently. "No, that was the stress talking. That was not me." "It was you," I said. "It was exactly you. You are not a victim of this man. You are his partner. You are just like him. The only difference is that he got caught first." She tried to grab my hand again. I stepped back, putting distance between us. Space she could never cross again. "Do not look at me for help," I said. "Do not call me for bail money. Do not call me for a lawyer. I am not your father anymore. I am not your ATM. I am just the man who called the police." I pointed to the phone that had fallen on the floor during the scuffle. Brad's phone. It was cracked, but it was still glowing. "You should call a public defender, Emily. I hear they are free, because you are going to need every penny you have to pay off the debts your husband left you." I looked at the detective. She nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement of the tragedy that had just played out. I nodded back. I turned around. I walked out the door. I walked past the police cars. I walked past the neighbors who had come out onto their porches wrapped in bathrobes, watching the downfall of the perfect couple in the big house. I climbed into my truck. The interior was still warm. I put it in reverse. I backed out of the driveway, my tires crushing the fresh snow. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I knew what was back there. A house that was no longer a home. A daughter who was no longer family. It was a mess. A debris field of broken trust and shattered lives. But it was not my mess to clean up. Not anymore. I drove toward the end of the street, toward the highway, toward the rest of my life. The morning light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the United Airlines Polaris Lounge was blindingly white, reflecting off the acres of snow that covered O'Hare Airport. It was a clean, sharp light, the kind that hurts your eyes but wakes you up. I sat in a leather armchair that was softer than anything in my own living room, watching the ground crews dice the wings of a massive Boeing 777. They sprayed clouds of orange steam into the freezing air, working with a rhythmic efficiency that I appreciated. I knew what it was like to work in that cold. I knew what it was like to do a job that nobody noticed until it wasn't done. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, dark, and strong. It tasted better than any cup I had brewed in the last 8 months. Maybe it was the quality of the beans, or maybe it was simply the taste of not being afraid anymore. I felt lighter. Physically lighter. It was a strange sensation because I was exhausted. I had not slept more than an hour in the hotel room I booked after leaving Oak Park. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the phantom echoes of police sirens and my daughter's screams. You would think I would be devastated. You would think a man who just sent his son-in-law to prison and disowned his only child would be a wreck. And a part of me was. There was a hollow ache in the center of my chest, a phantom pain where my heart used to be. It felt like I had undergone surgery without anesthesia. I had cut off a limb to save the body. It hurt. God, it hurt. But as I watched the snow swirl over the runway, I realized that the pain was clean. It was the pain of healing, not the pain of dying. I had spent months dying by degrees. Dying of loneliness, dying of the slow, creeping realization that I was a burden, dying of the gaslighting that made me question my own mind. Last night I stopped dying. I chose to live, and living apparently came with a side order of grief. I could handle grief. Grief was honest. Betrayal was not. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone one last time. The screen was bright, a portal to a world I was leaving behind. There were no new messages from Emily. No missed calls. Her phone was likely in an evidence bag, or perhaps she had simply realized that there was nothing left to say. The silence from her end was the loudest confirmation that I had done the right thing. If she had loved me even a little, she would have found a way to reach out not for money, but for forgiveness. But there was nothing, just the blank digital face of a device that had recorded the end of our relationship. I scrolled to Roth's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. I needed to make one last arrangement. I needed to sever the final anchor that held me to the frozen ground of Illinois. I pressed call. Roth answered on the first ring, his voice rasping with the fatigue of a man who had spent all night filing emergency motions and dealing with police reports. "Harrison," he said. "Are you safe? Are you at the airport?" "I am here, Roth," I said, leaning back into the soft leather of the chair. "I am in the lounge. I have a ticket in my hand." "Good." Roth exhaled a long, ragged sound of relief. "I spoke to the detective 10 minutes ago. Brad is being held without bail. The flight risk is too high given the Nevada warrant. Emily, she was released, but they are looking into charging her as an accessory. She is going to have a very hard few years, Harrison." I looked out the window at the gray sky. I felt a twinge of pity, distant and muted, like watching a stranger stumble on the ice. "She made her choices," I said. "I cannot protect her from them anymore. That was the problem, Roth. I protected her too much. I insulated her from reality until she thought she was above it. I am done playing God. She has to live in the world now just like the rest of us." "You are a harder man than I gave you credit for," Roth said, and I could hear the respect in his tone. "Most fathers would have folded. Most fathers would have written the check." "I almost did," I admitted. "I almost did." But then I remembered something Martha told me once. We were talking about a foundation that had cracked during a freeze. She said, "Harrison, you cannot patch a crack that goes all the way through. You have to pour it fresh." There was a pause on the line. "So what now?" Roth asked. "What about the house?" I closed my eyes. I pictured the big colonial in the suburbs. I pictured the rose garden under the snow. I pictured the empty nursery where Emily used to sleep. I pictured the dining room table where I had sat last night, pretending to be a feeble old man, while my family plotted my demise. "It is just wood and brick, Roth," I said. "It is not a home anymore. It is a crime scene." "Sell it," I said. "Sell it," Roth repeated, surprised. "All of it. Everything," I said. "The furniture, the rugs, the paintings. I do not want any of it. Hire an estate sale company to clear it out. Sell the property for market value. Put the proceeds into the trust for the hospital." "But—" "Martha's things," Roth hesitated. "I have my memories," I said, touching the breast pocket, where I kept a small laminated photo of my wife. "And I have her wedding ring on my pinky finger. That is all I need. The rest is just stuff. It is just dust gathering dust. I do not want to go back there, Roth. I do not want to walk through those halls and see ghosts. I want to be free." "Understood," Roth said softly. "I will take care of it. You will not have to lift a finger." "Thank you, my friend," I said, "for everything. You saved my life last night." "You saved yourself, Harrison," he replied. "I just drove the getaway car. Have a safe flight. Send me a postcard from the other side of the world." "I will," I said. "Goodbye, Roth." I ended the call. I powered down the phone. I watched the screen go black, extinguishing the last connection to my old life. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a physical sensation of release so profound it made me lightheaded. I stood up and walked to the bar. The attendant, a young woman with a kind smile, looked up. "Champagne, sir?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "The best you have." She poured a glass of Dom Perignon. The bubbles danced in the flute, rising to the surface in a frantic, joyful rush. I took the glass and walked back to the window. I raised the glass to the window, to the snow, to the city of Chicago that I had helped build. "Here is to foundations," I whispered. "And here is to knowing when to walk away from a building that is about to collapse." I took a sip. It was cold and crisp and tasted like victory. "Attention passengers," a soft female voice announced over the intercom. "United Airlines Flight 94 with service to Florence, Italy is now ready for boarding. We invite our Polaris first-class passengers to board at this time." Florence. Martha and I had talked about going for 40 years. We bought guidebooks. We looked at pictures of the Duomo. We talked about drinking wine in Tuscany and seeing the statue of David. But there was always work. There was always a project. There was always a reason to wait until next year. And then she ran out of years. I was not going to make the same mistake. I was going to Florence for her. I was going to drink the wine and see the art and walk the cobblestone streets. I was going to live enough for both of us. I finished the champagne in one long swallow. I set the glass down on the table. I picked up my small carry-on bag. It was light. I had left everything else behind. My clothes, my tools, my worries. I was traveling light for the first time in my life. I walked toward the gate. I stood tall. My back was straight. My stride was long and purposeful. I caught my reflection in the glass doors as I approached the jet bridge. I did not look like a 72-year-old widower running away from a tragedy. I looked like a man who had just been given a second chance. I handed my boarding pass to the agent. She scanned it. It beeped, a cheerful green light flashing. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Clark," she said. I smiled at her. A real smile. "I intend to," I said. I walked down the tunnel toward the plane. I did not look back at the terminal. I did not look back at the city. I did not look back at the ruin of my family. That was all behind me now, buried under the snow. Ahead of me was Italy. Ahead of me was the rest of my life. And for the first time in a long time, I was not just surviving. I was free. We often think that family is a bond that can never be broken, a safety net that will always catch us. But the hardest lesson life teaches us is that sometimes the people who share our blood are the ones holding the knife. We spend years making excuses for them, absorbing their toxicity, thinking that love means endurance. It does not. Love means respect. And when that respect is violated, when you are treated as a resource rather than a person, you have a duty to yourself to walk away. It is not cruel to protect your dignity. It is not selfish to save your own life. You cannot keep a relationship alive if the other person is trying to bury you. If you have ever felt like you were drowning to keep others afloat, hit the like button. If you have ever had to make the impossible choice to cut ties to save your sanity, subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to choose yourself. You are not alone, and it is never too late to start over.